Bodgies and welcome back to the channel. Today will most likely be one of the most interesting videos that I've made on this channel, and that is where I had live snakehead fish delivered right to my doorstep. Now, I understand that snakeheads are highly illegal in Australia, and if you're in possession of a live snakehead, I believe it's anywhere about $20,000 to $50,000 of a fine and 4 years of jail time, which I definitely do not want to go through. However, in a lot of other parts of the world, snakeheads are actually a very popular eating fish. And what other part of the world was I in very recently? India! You guessed right if you did guess right. But anyways, today will be part 2 of the India series of the videos that I filmed whilst I was on my holiday in India. And this is where we're going to have a look at the consumption of live snakehead and the really cool concept of how they're delivered right to your doorstep every weekend morning for you to select, clean, and then eat for your personal consumption. It's a very, very common practice in not just India, but a lot of other parts of the world. And actually, you can find dead or already processed snakehead meat in Australia as well. And they're a very nice tasting fish. But before we get into this video, as always, let's acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land I'm filming on, the land that you're watching this video on, and the amazing people who are currently managing our land as well. The other disclaimer is this video will show a live snakehead being dispatched on film, so if you don't want to see that sort of graphic content, then I highly suggest that you jump off this video at this point, and just feel free to wait till my next week's upload of the India series, which will be an equally interesting video as well, more so themed around the aquarium hobby. But that's all from me here in the fish room. Let's have a look at this live snakehead process. Right, so this is probably the coolest experience that I had when I was at India, and that is the snakehead man with his weekly snakehead runs. He basically rides around the streets every morning on the weekends with a bunch of live snakehead which get caught earlier that day. He then puts them in this orange container with a little bit of water just to make sure that their gills are wet, and with that they can survive for days on end. However, the demand for these snakeheads on the weekend is absolutely insane. These snakeheads that he captures will be sold out within about an hour of him riding around the streets because people will be waiting for him to come and will actually place orders as well in the week prior saying that, hey, look, we want 1 snakehead or 2 snakeheads, make sure you bring them, and he'll usually be able to catch these fish and bring them over. But we then selected the fish that we wanted, which was about 1.5 kilos, I believe, and came to about 500 rupees. And it was a great sized fish for a family of 6 with my grandparents, my family, my sister, and my parents. But the snakehead then gets cleaned essentially on your front doorstep. Now, I understand in Australia this would be the weirdest thing to ever happen. If someone was riding around the streets with a bucket of live fish that you're then wanting to get dispatched and cleaned in your front yard, it'd be an absolute mess. But you can see that he very cleanly has got an onion bag to stop any blood and scales and that kind of thing getting scattered all around the door. But along with that, there is a community service or a council sort of project where they do go ahead and come around washing the streets, and so it does maintain that cleanliness as well. Along with that, any birds or some of the lizards that live around the place do come ahead and clean things up really well, so there isn't too much of a worry about cleanliness. But the other thing that surprised me was just how fast he was able to dispatch this fish, and it just goes to show that swift and heavy hit to the head, along with his years of experience, really does make sure that the fish is swiftly put out of its misery, and he can then go on to cleaning it. Along with that, these snakeheads have very, very tough scales, so he has to use a specific knife designed for scaling to go ahead and remove all of those scales, remove the fins, and any unwanted parts that we don't necessarily want to eat or take into the consumption when we use this fish. Now, once the snakehead has been scaled, he'll then find a rough surface to actually scrape the fish against. And what this does is gets rid of the slime coat. Now, the slime coat is something that we're always trying to protect in our aquarium fish, but these fish are incredibly fresh. As you would have seen, this fish was alive maybe about 10 minutes ago. So what we then need to do is actually remove the slime coat because of how fresh it is. Generally, we don't seem to have this issue with fish that we buy at our fishmonger here in Australia because of the fact that they usually have been on ice for maybe about a few days or a week. However, these fish are incredibly fresh, meaning that even once it's been dispatched, that slime coat is still being produced by the skin. So to make sure that that doesn't create an off flavor, an incredibly fishy flavor, or have any sort of adverse texture when we eat the fish, it actually does need to be removed. But he'll just go to town on this fish for a few minutes to really ensure that all of the surfaces do not have any more slime production, to make sure that it's all dry, and to ensure that all of the remaining scales and that kind of thing are definitely taken off. The fish then gets a rinse and gets to the chopping board, where we actually wanted the fish to be cut up into some cutlets or friable pieces. So what he then does is just start cutting it. And whilst he does this and processes the fish, I wanted to sort of touch on the difference in lifestyle and just how tiring this is. He has to go ahead early in the morning, catch these fish, make sure that they're all alive, strapped to the back of his bike, which would probably be such a weird experience, riding a bike with water and fish sloshing around, and just making sure that it's balanced, he doesn't fall off, the fish don't fall out or jump out, and then ride around the streets asking if people want to purchase these fish, and that's how he can then purchase the dinner for himself to eat. It's an incredibly tiring process because he then has to clean and make sure that every individual fish is processed to the customer's satisfaction, then go ahead and catch more fish for the following day, and the process repeats. We have this incredibly amazing luxury of just going to the fishmonger, having a wide array of fresh fish that have been on ice, and then selecting exactly what we want at the size that we want. And it's very, very convenient to go ahead and get these fish properly packaged, well refrigerated, and keep them in our fridge or freezer until we want to eat them at a later stage. Unfortunately, both the buyer and the seller don't have this luxury of proper refrigeration, and it was just a very interesting concept that I was able to see. This fish was then fried and it tasted absolutely amazing, which is always evident with fresh fish, but that's about it. Alrighty, Bodgies and Widgies, I really hope you enjoyed that video. The one thing I do regret is just not filming the cooking process of that snakehead, and it tasted really, really good. Like I mentioned, they're a very common eating fish, not just in India, but Asia, even the United States is picking up on that because they do have an invasive problem. Thank God that we don't have snakeheads here in Australia, because that would decimate our native population, and they're an extremely predatory fish, but also make for a fantastic eating fish as well. So if you're looking for that next sort of like bucket list seafood, freshwater food to try out, I'd highly recommend to maybe give snakeheads out a shot to really increase their sort of reputation of being a good eating fish, and that hopefully does some good conservation work on bringing down the wild populations of snakeheads in places like the United States where they're not meant to be, because they are decimating the native population there. But essentially that's it from me. Really hope you enjoyed this video. It was a very interesting concept to see that man deliver these fish directly to your door. But as always, stay happy, stay safe, stay Aussie Australian. Bodgie out.